Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
None of this is real, argue President Trump's supporters as he moved again today to distance himself not only from his former campaign chief Paul Manafort, but from that junior campaign advisor who's admitted he lied to the FBI about his contacts with the Russians. Now, new evidence yesterday revealed that George Papadopoulos had been involved in an attempt to arrange a meeting between Kremlin officials and the Trump team, apparently on the promise of dirt on the Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Even as the president plays defense, Robert Mueller, special counsel described by his colleagues as objective and methodical, is persevering. In the cast of this DC political thriller, Robert Mueller is the star. The 73-year-old ex-FBI boss was appointed special counsel to investigate collusion between the Trump campaign team and Russia after President Trump suddenly fired then FBI Director James Comey in May. He'd been leading the federal investigation, which seemed focused at first on Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor forced to resign after appearing to lie about his Russian links. But Flynn wasn't the one who Mueller went after yesterday. Paul Manafort, the president's former campaign manager, and Manafort's deputy, Rick Gates, were arrested and charged. They've both pleaded not guilty to counts including money laundering. Neither Russia nor Donald Trump were directly mentioned in their indictments. That was yesterday. Today, of course, is Halloween, and that is apparently what the White House would like us to focus on. In a moment, Alex Thompson will have more on the plea deal investigators have struck with that Trump campaign volunteer, the London-based foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos. But first, without any overt sense of irony, even as former members of his campaign team spend their first full day under house arrest, the president posted on Twitter a spooky seasonal video from the White House. For the Trump administration, these days, in truth, are more trick than treat.
Careful, guys. Careful.
Anyone in search of a scary story and nefarious deeds need look no further than what was revealed yesterday as his former campaign chief Paul Manafort and his business partner Rick Gates were charged with money laundering on a massive scale, accused of shifting $75 million through offshore accounts, much of it won through their undeclared work for the pro-Russian Ukrainian faction led by Viktor Yanukovych. As they began a period of house arrest, Paul Manafort's lawyer sounded more like he was working for the president than defending his guy.
Well, I think you all saw today that President Donald Trump was correct. There is no evidence that Mr. Manafort or the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government.
That was clearly the talking point. Nothing to see here.
All of the activities, as I understand it, that they were indicted for was long before they ever met Donald Trump.
The White House alleging this all happened long before Paul Manafort was engaged by the Trump campaign, although the indictment alleges he was shifting dirty money all the while.
We're not worried about it distracting because it doesn't have anything to do with us, because this is something that is action that took place outside of the campaign or campaign activity. We still expect this to conclude soon.
Is that wishful thinking, do you think?
I think it is, and I think that's the public message that the White House wants to send. But this indictment, as well as the plea agreement with Mr. Papadopoulos, doesn't indicate that this investigation is wrapping up anytime soon.
Good morning. Tip of the iceberg.
That will no doubt further enrage the president, reportedly seething as he watches news coverage and tapping out angry tweets in response. The fake news is working overtime. As Paul Manafort's lawyer said, there was no collusion, and events mentioned took place long before he came to the campaign. Few people knew the young, low-level volunteer named George, who's already proven to be a liar. Check the Dems. But if the president can't change the commentary, maybe he can find a more permanent fix. There are reports today that his former advisor Steve Bannon wants the president to throw a haymaker and sack Robert Mueller, which might explain why so many are forming a defense line around him. From Bernie Sanders.
I hope very much that President Trump fully understands that he will not interfere or try to obstruct this investigation.
To Lindsey Graham.
I see no reason for him to be dismissed, and the only reason you could do it is for cause, and if there was some effort to do it without a good reason, it'd be wholly held against him.
The ghouls are already on the White House lawn. For now, it's all just dressing up, but this is an administration haunted by Russia, its influence over the election, and the possible wrongdoing of those around the president. To make America great again, President Trump still has to exorcise the ghosts of deals past that may have paved his way to the White House. Now, in this highly tangled tale, it seems many roads lead to London, especially the allegations involving the former Trump campaign advisor, George Papadopoulos. Now, he's admitted lying to the FBI about his dealings with two people claiming to have links with Russia. They include an unnamed professor believed to be Joseph Mifsud, an honorary director of the London Academy of Diplomacy. The court papers claim the professor introduced Mr. Papadopoulos to a Russian woman said to be related to Vladimir Putin. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, has been on the London trail.
Make America great again.
So now we know a Trump election campaign member now says he connected the president's election machine to an alleged Kremlin operation to smear Hillary Clinton. We know because campaign aide George Papadopoulos, seen here with Trump and senior campaign staffers, admits connecting the campaign with alleged Kremlin promises of smear emails on Hillary Clinton. That connection, according to Papadopoulos, was a professor, and it happened right here in London.
I hope you had a good lunch.
The man is British professor Joseph Mifsud. The man George Papadopoulos says he met whilst he was part of the Trump election campaign team to try and smear Clinton. Papadopoulos was arrested by the FBI in Washington, D.C. on July the 27th. He's pleaded guilty to lying to them, apparently to protect the Trump campaign. The FBI indictment states,
Defendant Papadopoulos acknowledged that the professor had told him about the Russians possessing dirt on then-candidate Hillary Clinton in the form of thousands of emails, but stated multiple times that he learned that information prior to joining the campaign.
That was a lie. Papadopoulos was very much in the Trump campaign when the professor talked about the Kremlin dirt.
And the professor told defendant Papadopoulos about the thousands of emails on or about April 26, 2016, when defendant Papadopoulos had been a foreign policy advisor to the campaign for over a month.
The indictment says that in London, on or about March the 24th last year, the professor introduced Papadopoulos to a Russian woman saying she was a relative of President Putin with connections to senior Kremlin officials. Joseph Mifsud agrees he met Papadopoulos and is the professor in the indictment, but claims all his Russian contacts are purely academic. There are plenty of photos of Professor Mifsud at the Russian embassy. Embassy records show officials met him elsewhere in London, and he's known to have visited Russia frequently and spoken at prominent Moscow conferences. Though not seen on the homepage, he's listed online as an honorary director of the London Academy of Diplomacy, apparently part of the University of East Anglia. Its address appears to be in the City of London, where several British universities have sites.
And if you go online, you'll find this building, 102 Middlesex Street, is where the London Academy of Diplomacy is supposed to be. However, the security guard has just told us they moved out of here 6 months ago. Furthermore, the University of East Anglia says that although they did give an honorary degree to Professor Mifsud for some 3 years, from 2013 to 16, they no longer have any connection either with him or the London Academy for Diplomacy, wherever that may be now.
And of course, phone the number listed for the London Academy of Diplomacy, and guess what? In fact, Professor Mifsud is now attached to Stirling University. Today they said the allegations are speculation and have not taken any action. He's also listed as an honorary director of the London Centre of International Law Practice in this plush central London square.
Well, there we are. We tried, but nobody in. Perhaps they'll get back to us, though. Who knows? Don't hold your breath.
Now with me is Matthew Miller, political advisor and former Department of Justice spokesperson, and Chris Prudhomme, who's president of Vote America Now. Chris Prudhomme, what do you think of the president's attempt so far to steer a steady course through this? He's taking distance quite clearly from these people. Is he right to do that?
Absolutely, he certainly is right to do that. Of course, Papadopoulos, as the president has said, President Trump has said, he has been proven to be a liar. I mean, obviously he has colluded to bring, allegedly, to bring obviously the Russians, and from what he said during the campaign, and try to get dirt on Hillary Secretary Clinton.
There is a picture of him sitting at the table just down, three people along from the president. So he had some degree of access.
Of course. I mean, anybody, look at any point, anybody in any political campaign at any point can have any certain type of access, depending on what they're trying to do, what the goal they're trying to accomplish. President Trump is certainly right to distance himself. I certainly don't believe that he had anything to do. Now, of course, anything that anybody else had to do with the campaign, I think is totally separate. I think these particular allegations that Mueller has brought up on are totally aside from the campaign overall itself.
We'll come back to that in a moment. But first, George Papadopoulos, Matthew, is it potentially the case that the value of him will be what information he's been able to contribute to the investigation, not necessarily how high a ranking official he was?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. If you look at the way the Department of Justice makes these kind of cases historically, what they do is start at the bottom, bring charges against someone at a low level, convince them to cooperate as a witness, which is what they've now done with George Papadopoulos, and then bring that investigation further and further up the ranks.
So they squeeze. There's a squeeze going on.
They squeeze someone at the very junior ranks of the campaign now. They want to move their way all the way up. And what their next goal would be get someone mid-level, someone senior, who can tell them what happened when George Papadopoulos came and said, I have information that the Russians have dirt on Hillary Clinton, that they have stolen emails about Hillary Clinton. When he told his supervisor, what did that person do? Did he tell the President of the United States, Donald Trump?
Let's come back to Paul Manafort and his business colleague. I mean, you say that these are financial crimes that they've been charged with, and it's important to say that they've both pleaded not guilty. But at the very least, the president is a very poor judge of character, isn't he? And shouldn't he support the idea that someone is going after these people for these kinds of financial crimes? Isn't he better to take a position whereby he supports the investigation? Otherwise, it does tend to look like he's got something to hide.
Well, I certainly think, obviously, Paul Manafort being a friend, associate, and business colleague of his, he certainly does. He wants to wait till all the cards laid out on the table before he just jumps to a particular conclusion. Nothing definitive has happened other than obviously the charges. And again, these are charges that certainly were before the campaign. So I think the president is right to kind of to take a stance that certainly is neutral, and at the same time to be fair, because at the end of the day, I mean, all this could just be, you just never know. He might have one charge, it might be a minimal charge, and has nothing to do with actually the entire collective conclusion as is overall.
But it doesn't make his administration look good at this moment. He can't seem to make this Russia investigation go away. He's been trying to make it go away for the better part of a year now. He's trying to get tax reform through.
You're absolutely right, and I certainly think it's important to have the American people get something done. We need things done, obviously, in Congress. Obviously, healthcare has failed. We need to get that back up on the table. Obviously, tax reform, and I certainly think that's what the focus should be. Look, the reality is that we would not even be having this conversation if he wasn't elected President of the United States. I certainly think there's a lot of other things to focus on, and frankly, I think, obviously...
the question is surely how he became the President of the United States, not that he is.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. But look, there's a lot of questions that we all can talk about. I think, I mean, look at the focus when you look at Hillary Clinton and the Dozier and her emails. I mean, there's not really been an immense focus on that.
Yeah, there is an effort to shift the focus to that.
Absolutely right. So,
can I just pick up on something that the White House said yesterday? The White House spokeswoman said, look, we feel like this might be coming to a close, that this is the kind of the beginning of the end of this. Is that wishful thinking, do you think?
It's absolutely wishful thinking. If you look at what one of the court documents that was unsealed yesterday, one of Bob Mueller's prosecutors said this George Papadopoulos guilty plea is a very small part of a large-scale ongoing federal investigation. Remember, the president isn't just being investigated for what happened during his campaign in 2016. He's also being investigated for whether he committed a criminal act in the White House, whether he tried to obstruct justice by asking senior intelligence officials to interfere with the FBI investigation, asking Jim Comey, the former FBI director, to back off that investigation, and ultimately firing him when he said no. This investigation has a long way to go.
Okay, Matthew Mueller, Chris Prudhomme, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
A lot to discuss, but I suspect we'll be here again talking through it soon. But for now, that's all for us. Back to you in London.
Kylie Morris, for whom the police sirens tell, we don't know.